But now it's time for our quarterback rankings that we are going to release right now, this year's version. We do it every year. We do it in our sleep. Zach, I'm looking forward to this one, man. Anytime we get to rank quarterbacks in the NFL, it's always a fun thing to do. Very controversial thing to do as well. Our lists are not going to be perfect, but it's going to be worth it. Zach, I want to talk about my criteria before we get into the list here because I think it's very important that we educate our listeners on how we did our rankings, right? Because it's very important to understand why we rank the way we do. I know for me personally, eye test is always going to be a top criteria for me with my own two eyes. These are the 32 best quarterbacks in football. Obviously, you have to start or be projected to start or start. For example, this is where the conundrum happens because there's certain guys we think might start week 1, but by week 5, they're out of there. I'm not going to rank those guys because they're only going to play 5 games. It's a waste of my ranking. Okay. But I am ranking projected starters, but you have to play half the season. So if I believe you're getting bench, I'm not ranking you here if you're getting bench after week 10. Just want to let everybody know that right now. Projections. That's the biggest part here when it comes to this ranking as well. I've cooled off on the projections this year because I've gotten burnt sometimes by projecting a quarterback higher than where he was. And, because I'm banking on upside and then I got burnt. It happens every single year. So I'm going to ease off a little bit on the projections, but that's definitely a part of this as well. I project you to be an even better quarterback next year, winning the MVP. So with that being said, Zach, if you want to introduce your criteria, and then I guess I'll proceed with mine, and then you proceed with yours.
Yeah, Lil. So I'm just going to make this clear. You could base your rankings on anything you want. Projections, stats, eye test. The number one criteria for my list will and always be winning. Does your team win under your watch? The quarterback is the most important position. And I know we like to get into arguments. Oh, wins shouldn't be a quarterback stat. And I think to a certain extent that's true. Obviously, every quarterback situation is different. We've seen plenty of quarterbacks, especially in recent years, guys that got drafted really high into a bad situation, failed, and find a new home, and immediately their career is right back on track. That has been a very common trend we've seen in recent memory. And in these rankings, I do try my best to try to put that into account. I understand not every situation is the same, but the one thing that's equal for all 32 quarterbacks that we're going to be ranking is you're going to have the opportunity to win games. And it doesn't matter what my opinion of you is prior. If you win games, you will climb your way up this list. There are plenty of guys. I'll give you an example, actually. I was looking back, prepping for this exercise at my list last year. I had Bo Nix at number 32. And this is a guy that threw 40 touchdowns and made the playoffs last year as a rookie. You could guarantee he's not going to be that low, and he'll be much higher on my list this time around. So winning will and always will be the number one priority. And then I think the rest of the list is just a combination of everything you mentioned. Eye test, stats, projections. I do like to not overdo it, but I do like to say, you know what? If there's a guy that might not be as proven as some other guys, but I think he's going to have a big time year, yeah, I'm probably going to rank him higher than most. And there are a few guys on this list that I definitely think would fit that criteria. But I just want to make myself clear. Winning will always be the number one priority. If you win, you will guarantee to raise your way up at the top of this list.
And I could definitely add on to that because I do think winning matters. And that's why there's a particular quarterback that goes by the name of Baker Mayfield that over the years I wasn't a fan of. I thought he was arrogant. I wasn't a fan coming out of college. I wasn't sold when he was a number 1 overall pick. I wasn't sold when he was in Cleveland. I said, yes, go for Deshaun Watson despite the 22 allegations of sexual assault. Wasn't sold in Tampa. But guess what? He continued to win and win and win. And now don't expect to hear from me announcing Baker Mayfield anytime soon because he's going to be much higher than where I had him in previous years. But anyway, number 32, Zach, we might as well get into it. We are doing 32 through 27 on this episode, and then we'll do more next week. I'm going to go with Tyler Show from the Saints. And look, to be honest with you, this is probably going to be, and look, I've watched football a long time, pretty much all my life. And this has been, and this is going to be, the most irrelevant quarterback competition I've ever seen in New Orleans. Derek Carr did this team a favor by retiring this offseason with his horrible contract. Okay, he and Clint Kubiak proved something last year, that they could not handle adversity last season. They can't handle it. Derek Carr already proved that prior when he got benched in Las Vegas and quit on his own team. This guy has no fight in him. This guy do not know how to handle adversity at all. So he did his team a favor with that horrible contract by hanging the cleats up. Now, I do think Kellen Moore, and I'm going to say this with all due respect to Kellen Moore, he's a good play caller. I thought he had an excellent playoffs. I think he's going to regret accepting this head coaching job. There's certain jobs that you should just pass on. I get it. Everybody wants a quick fix. Everybody want a better bank account. Everybody want a better resume. I get it. But that does not mean you should jump for every single opportunity that's given to you. There's nothing wrong with coming back to a stacked Philly team, winning another championship potentially, and waiting for more lucrative opportunities than this garbage in New Orleans right now, with all due respect. Now, when we get to Tyler more individually, you look at his record and resume, the first thing that stands out is his resilience. I believe he overcame 2 broken collarbones, a broken leg, losing quarterback battles before winning the job at Louisville and throwing for 3,195 yards while completing 63% of his passes. You love the resilience because the NFL is not going to be easy. You walk right into a quarterback battle that you got to prove yourself. I think that stands out the most here. And also his physical attributes, 6'5", 220 pounds. He has the physical tools to play in the modern game, but can he play at a high level? I guess we'll find that out. And clearly the Saints are not built to compete, so I'm not expecting a lot from this team, and thus I'm going to rank Tyler Stroh number 32 on my quarterback rankings. Number 31, I'm going to go with Mr. Unlimited because he's limited. Russell Wilson. Look, Russell Wilson showed us when he first got to Pittsburgh last year that, he could have a few vintage games like he did against the Bengals, the Commanders. Vintage games, But the reality is this version of him is shot. All right? His only effective strength when you watch the film, and folks, I just encourage you to watch the film. Don't argue with me. Don't debate with me. Just watch the film. Let the film do the talking. He only does this moon ball up the sideline that he's very good on. He throws an accurate deep ball, beautiful, accurate deep ball, but it's only these moon balls up the sideline that he's great for. And look, I think Malik Neighbors' development is going to skyrocket. We saw George Pickens last year get a lot of opportunities to make plays on the ball because Russell Wilson do a great, accurate deep ball. Okay? And I think that Malik Neighbors is going to have an opportunity with the veteranship of Wilson to be able to make plays and increase his stock, so when he get a real quarterback, he can be able to blossom. Look, Zach, this is all you need to know. Sean Payton is a Hall of Fame coach. He said, I'll risk my job undergoing a full rebuild while finding my quarterback, while paying Russell Wilson to play elsewhere, than to bring him back. Mike Tomlin is a Hall of Fame coach, and Mike Tomlin said, I'll take my chances playing the waiting game for Aaron Rodgers, the uncertainty game with Aaron Rodgers over bringing back Russell Wilson. That's all you need to know. I do believe by week 6, we'll see Jaxon Dart to save, obviously, Brian Daboll's and Joe Sheen's job. And that's why I'm going to rank Russell Wilson this low at 31. And number 30, we're going to keep it moving. I'm going to go with Daniel Jones. And the reports are that he's outperforming AR-15. I believe it. And I don't know how accurate those reports are. But what I do know is Daniel Jones does have a lot of football experience for what it's worth than AR-15. I do believe that he'll win the QB1 opportunity for the Colts. And look, he's not a great quarterback, obviously, but he doesn't throw the prettiest ball, the most accurate ball, but he's mobile, okay? And he wasn't very good in New York. We know that, but the situation wasn't great either. So the way how I'm looking at it is I remember when he left the Vikings, I thought that was a mistake, leaving Kevin O'Connell in that great situation over there. But look, it looked like he made the right choice. If he's given the opportunity to win this job, that's what you want. You want to compete. You're a competitor, right? You don't want to be a backup quarterback cheering on J.J. McCarthy. Give me a J. Give me a J. No, you want to play, okay? And I think he's going to have an opportunity to play and win this job. AR-15, man, his story is very unfortunate because he has the skills to pay the bills. He has the attributes. He has the strong arm. Listen, there's some highlights, especially against the Texans, where he made this incredible throw that I think is an all-time throw in the history of the National Football League. Maybe a top 10 throw of all time, but he just can't get it together. And I don't think, based off last year, that the Colts have the patience to deal with the development. And that's why I think Daniel Jones is going to start. And I do think he's going to take less chances as a passer than AR-15, which could be a good thing, a more efficient thing. His mobility with Jonathan Taylor out of the backfield could take a little bit of the pressure off the offense. But who are we kidding? He's not a great quarterback. And who knows if he's going to start the entire year. I'm going to go with Daniel Jones at number 30. At number 29, I'm going to go with Shedeur Sanders at number 29. I think the Browns are going to be everybody's favorite preseason team because they're going to have multiple quarterbacks that are going to play that we care about, that we want to see how they look. Kenny Pickett, Joe Flacco, Shedeur, even Tyler Gabriel, how that looks. But look, I think Shedeur Sanders will not start week 1, but I do think he will start sooner rather than later. Look, I'm not a fan of the cockiness from the Sanders family at all. I'm not. Some people could take it or leave it. I'll leave it. But I do think he can play. Did he fall? Was it a conspiracy in the NFL to allow him to fall to the 5th round? Listen, I don't think so. I'm not going to sit here and bang on the table conspiracy. I think the attitude, listen, we forget that there's a character element to being drafted. Okay, it's not only football. Sure, a lot of people get away with it if they're really, really good, but there's a character element in the game of football. And the fact that my guy is out here getting speeding tickets, look, and I'm not saying he should go to jail for a speeding ticket. We all have sped before with a limit, but when you know that it's not a guarantee that you're going to make the football team, I would want to make sure I'm a law-abiding citizen, not breaking a rule, not even dropping a pen in a classroom, okay? I want to make sure I'm on the best behavior because I might not even make the team. But obviously, I'm ranking him. I do think he's going to make the team. Obviously, I'm ranking him. I do think he's going to eventually start for the Cleveland Browns. I do think he's an accurate thrower of the football. I do think, he'll be able to read a defense better. I do think that, sure, he needs to stop taking unnecessary sacks, and that's going to be a big problem in the NFL. But I do think he do have some skills that you like. Maybe the cocky personality could benefit him in this quarterback battle. So look, I'm going to go with Shedeur at number 29. I do think Kenny Pickett might start week 1. I don't think Joe Flacco's playing this year. I just think that was to get a veteran quarterback in the room to mentor these guys. And I do think that Shedeur would take the job from Kenny Pickett and get the majority of reps and the majority of starts. And that's why I'm ranking him at number 29. And at number 28, I'm going to go with Justin Fields. The reality is, and look, I like the guy. Listen, I like Justin Fields. We could go out for a beer and talk about the game. But he cannot read an NFL defense. And that's just the reality. You know how bad you have to be, to get benched despite going 4-2? And look, I know I got on Mike Tomlin for doing it. I know I got on Mike Tomlin for, benching Fields after going 4-2. Because I don't believe in Mike Tomlin and his ways of philosophy in this modern game, right? I got on him. But when you think about it, he had a long time to evaluate, Fields. And sure, I wanted him to continue to evaluate his long-term development. But he had all preseason to do so. There was no competition. Russell Wilson was hurt. He had all preseason, all camp, all 6 games to decisively win the job. He didn't do it, folks. He did not do it because he showed Mike Tomlin that he's not an NFL starting quarterback. And I hate to say it, okay, but I got to be real with you. I get it. We like the guy. Maybe he should run for mayor in New York, okay? We like his athleticism. We like his running ability. We like his strong arm, but he still cannot read the field. He holds the ball too long, okay? And I have no idea what to expect from him on the Jets. I'm going to be honest with you, Zach. I don't know how you feel about this, but I don't know what to expect from the Jets this year. Maybe Fields and Garrett Wilson can recreate some of that chemistry they had in college. Maybe. I thought Fields looked a little better when he had DJ Moore in Chicago. But look, he has 44 starts in his career and only threw for over 300 yards twice. One of them was in garbage time against the Colts, where he was forced to come back in garbage time, playing from behind. So again, I would encourage anybody to show me the film where this guy can read in the NFL defense and come back to me. I got him at number 28. And at number 27, to cap off my first set of lists, I'm going to go with Cam Ward. He has the right attitude, very slippery in the pocket, nice downfield vision, throws a beautiful, accurate ball. No doubt in my mind, he is the best quarterback in this class, and the NFL has agreed with me, obviously. But this is where I worry a little bit, just a little bit. We saw great rookie seasons from C.J. Stroud and Jaden Daniels the past 2 years. Stroud won a playoff game in year one. Daniels got to the NFC Championship game in year one. So I'm a little bit worried that Cam Ward is facing pressure to level up to those two guys, okay? Because what Stroud and Daniels were able to do in year one is an anomaly. It's not going to happen every single year. He has to play free, take some of the lumps and bruises as a typical rookie should. The Titans are a building team with a revamping O-line that allowed a league high in sacks last season. So I think there is cause for, okay, he's going to have his lumps and bruises. But I think the guy is going to be a very good football player in the future. And I'm going to bank on his upside in years to come. Right now, I'm going to rank Cam Ward at number 27. So to recap my list, at number 32, I got Tyler Show. At number 31, I got Russell Wilson. At number 30, I got Daniel Jones. At number 29, I got Shedeur Sanders. At number 28, I got Justin Fields. And number 27, I got Cam Ward. Zach, the mic is yours.
Yeah, well, before I get to my list, I'll ask you about Fields. So I mentioned at the top of my list that there have been many quarterbacks over our years doing the list where we'll rank them one year, they're pretty down, or we rank them based on having a down year, and then they go to a new situation. And you mentioned Baker Mayfield, right? That's a perfect example. They go to a new situation and they take off. And my question for you is, how do you compare Fields' situation with the Jets to his two prior stops? Because obviously when he got drafted by Chicago, we knew that was just a disaster from the beginning. He got drafted right before Matt Nagy's final season. We all knew going into that season that he was on the hot seat. He had no wide receivers, no offensive line. We knew that as soon as they drafted him, that situation was destined to fail. Ryan Poles makes the big trade with Carolina. We knew that they were going to have the number one pick. His second year, they draft Caleb Williams, and we know the rest. And then Pittsburgh, we've spoken a lot about the show about Mike Tomlin and his inability to develop quarterbacks. We know that Arthur Smith, he's not your favorite offensive coordinator. So when you compare Fields' situation with the Jets compared to his prior two stops, do you think it's a better situation than those two or worse?
I think the Steelers were, and that's a good question. I think the Steelers is a better situation due to the fact that although we criticize Mike Tomlin for not adapting, for not getting a true wide receiver two, for being stuck in his ways, that still is a team that wins football games in the regular season. That still is a team that he won 4 games and was 4-2 on. That still is a team that Mason Rudolph was able to get to the playoffs with. Okay, so clearly there is a level of they do just enough to win ball games. And Fields was on that trajectory. Although I didn't look at the tape and thought it was Fields doing it. I didn't think that Fields was the reason why they won 4 games. I thought, based on what I saw, their defense, TJ Watt and company, is the reason why they won 4 games. The coaching ability, I'm not gonna sit here, and I know I get on Mike Tomlin. I'm not gonna sit here and act like he's not a good coach. He's still a good coach. That's why they won 4 games. Nothing to do with Justin Fields. So you look at the Jets and their history and their quarterback history and how they got Aaron Rodgers, which was supposed to be the woohoo, we go to the championship, and they failed too. Even Aaron Rodgers in his industrious career could not rewrite the long history of New York. I don't think Fields could do the same thing, but you have a regime change, but you have a new head coach, you have a new voice, but you have some young talent here still to like. That's what makes it, very fascinating. That's why I said in my lap, I don't know what to expect from Justin Fields and the Jets because I really don't, honestly.
Okay, and then my last question before I get to my list. I find it interesting that you had Shedeur ranked, but not Jaxon Dart. So are you saying, based on your criteria, that you think that Shedeur will see the field first before Jaxon Dart?
I do. I think that he will see the field first, mainly because I don't think Kenny Pickett is any good. And I think that the Browns is going to want to, they keep Shedeur on the roster, barring that he stays on the roster. I think they're going to want to see what this kid has. I think he might impress in the preseason. And even if he does outplay these other guys, I still don't think he'll get the nod, but it will be fresh in these coaches' minds, especially Stefanski, who's a quarterback guy, that it's time to put him out there. I think Russell Wilson will play a little bit longer than week 6 that I initially spelled. I think he'll play half the season. And I think we'll get some Jaxon Dart in there to save their jobs. But I think it's going to come late. I think what's going to happen is that Brian Daboll's going to hear the crowd and know that the job is on the line. Clearly, it already is. And I think he'll throw Jaxon Dart in there. And that's why I didn't rank Jaxon Dart, because I think he's going to come somewhere in the middle of the season.
Okay. Without further ado, I think it's time to get to my list, number 32 through 27. And let's get into it. So we're on the same wavelength ranking a Saints quarterback at number 32. I'm actually going to go with Spencer Rattler instead of Tyler Shuck. And I think it's a pure coin flip. It's funny. You said it's probably the most irrelevant quarterback competition that you remember. How would you compare this to the Raiders quarterback competition last year with Gardner Minshew and Aiden O'Connell? You think the Raiders had the edge or the Saints?
I think the Saints is worse because we know what Gardner Minshew had, which wasn't much. But, Minshew on a good day, I remember when he was on the Colts, he looked good. He almost made the playoffs with the Colts. So that was actually his best season. He was coming off his best season individually to me. So that's what made it a little bit more intriguing. Aiden O'Connell almost beat the Chiefs on Black Friday. So I think this is the worst.
On Christmas. The Raiders won that game without him completing a pass in the fourth quarter. But that was really the first one that came to mind for me. But with Rattler, look, I just think it's interesting because I was not the biggest Shuck fan, but it's clear that Kellen Moore disagrees with me. And I'm wondering, does Kellen Moore view Shuck as a guy that could actually be the long-term solution here? Or does he view him as a guy that he's somewhat intrigued by, but worse comes to worse, if he doesn't work out, they could just draft a quarterback next year. And we don't know exactly about next year's quarterback class and if there are going to be any guys like blue chip prospects that are worth taking in the top 5. But I think what's so interesting is that in each of the last 2 years, we've seen guys, older quarterbacks, throughout the college football season go from guys that were projected originally to be like 5th round picks or later to guys that are into the top 5, right? Jaden Daniels fits that mold. Cam Ward fits that mold. Joe Burrow from back in the day at LSU, he fits that mold. Are we going to see a guy that makes that jump now? There's some guys I really like. Arch Manning, of course, he's the hot name that is going to have the opportunity to play at Texas this year. You have a kid, Lenora Sellers at South Carolina, that's super athletic, super mobile. I think he could be the real deal. But I do think Shuck will see the field. I think Rattler will get the edge just based on experience. He did play a little bit last year, but I do think his ceiling is a backup at best. And honestly, well, I think if you ask me who is going to be the worst team in the NFL this year, I think the Saints are a pretty good bet to make in that category. I do agree with you. I think Derek Carr retiring could be something could be something we view as a blessing in disguise. But with that being said, I do think Kellen Moore was a good hire. And I do think that this could be a hire that works out for both sides, as long as both sides know that this is going to be a rebuild and it's going to take some time. This is not the post-Sean Payton, Drew Brees Saints with Dennis Allen, where even though those two guys retired, they were still spending like drunken sailors trying to win, even though they didn't do that in a mediocre, wide-open NFC South. And I think that is what really put this Saints team behind the eight ball, is that they just spent so much money over recent years. They didn't win anything, and it's finally catching up to them. I think whatever quarterback is put into the situation, it's not going to be pretty. We saw Rattler last year. He had some moments, but nothing really spectacular. I'll give him the edge based on experience, but it's an ugly situation. I'm intrigued to see about Chuck. He's an older quarterback, so I think he'll get on the field soon, but I do think Rattler ultimately starts the season. I'll have him at number 32. At number 31, this is actually where I disagree with you a bit. I'm going to go with Joe Flacco, and I do think that Joe Flacco is going to be the Browns starting quarterback week 1, just based on the fact that it wasn't that long ago that he was the starting quarterback for this team, and he got them to the playoffs, and he provided them with some very good moments. And I found it interesting. He had a quote during OTAs, and he said, "I'm not here to be a mentor. I'm here to play." And I do think, based on that quote, that he's going to be this team starting quarterback week 1. I do think there's a chance Kenny Pickett gets cut or he gets moved. Same thing could be said about Dylan Gabriel. I'm just, besides Shedeur, this quarterback room is pretty uninspiring. It's pretty uninteresting. And what fascinates me about Cleveland is Kevin Stefanski actually on the hot seat? Because I feel like this team, it's pretty unlikely that they're going to win anything this year. And if they don't, what are they going to do with their head coach and GM? Because I don't think they're bad. I think that they're still just trying to recover from that brutal Deshaun Watson decision and that contract. That's something that's going to set this franchise back for a really long time. And I think that's part of the reason why they decided to bring back Joe Flacco, just for the sentiment of, okay, it wasn't that long ago that this guy was bringing us to the playoffs, providing us with some good moments. Maybe he could rediscover some of that magic. I do think he's going to be their quarterback to start the season, but ultimately it's going to be week 8, week 9. This team's going to be 2-6, 2-7, and we're going to be clamoring for Shedeur. And look, I said it when we did our podcast with Lee Jones right before the draft. I do think Shedeur is going to be the second best quarterback in this draft. I think the reason why he fell was just because the NFL, they just had no interest in him. They had no interest in his dad and their attitude. You see some of the reports about him blowing off teams for meetings and not really being engaged. But I think hopefully he could view that as a learning experience. Look, I love Dion. I think he's done a great job at Colorado. But I think for now, just shutting your mouth and just letting your son live his own journey, live his own story would be something I would recommend. And look, I understand the Browns aren't historically the best place where quarterbacks want to go and have success. But if there is one guy that could help this Cleveland Browns team recover from the disastrous Deshaun Watson experience, I do think it's Shedeur. I think he has that it factor. I don't think he's the perfect prospect. I think you have to put him in a pretty good position around him. And I'm fascinated by Kevin Stefanski. Like, I'm confident, even though last year was a disaster, if he gets let go and he's on the market, a team's going to hire him in a second. I still think he's one of the best offensive coaches in the game. So I'll have Joe Flacco at number 31, but there's no doubt all eyes will be on Shedeur. At number 30, I'm going to have Russell Wilson of the Giants. I think it was just a major bummer for the Giants that they were all in on Matthew Stafford, but the Rams re-signed him. They weren't going to let him go, and the Giants' pivot was Russell Wilson. And look, as good as Malik Nabers is, I've said this many times on this show, I think the Giants and Brian Daboll and Joe Shane are already regretting taking Malik Nabers instead of a quarterback in last year's draft. There were so many guys on the board, from J.J. McCarthy to Michael Penix to Bo Nix. We know they were trying to trade up for either Drake May or Jaden Daniels, and they ended up with a wide receiver and no quarterback instead, which really forced them to take a quarterback in this year's class, which is just not as good. We know that based on what we saw last year. Now, when it comes to Jaxon Dart, I do think he has promise. I think he has potential, but I think taking him in the first round was a huge risk. It was a huge reach, I should say. And I don't think he's in a position to succeed entering the season with the New York Giants, because the pressure is going to be on to play him right away, when I just don't necessarily think he's ready. Based on what I saw from Jaxon Dart at Ole Miss last year, I think he has potential, but I think he's a guy that would probably benefit from sitting a year or two and learning and getting used to the NFL. But instead, it kind of seems likely that Russell Wilson's going to start. It's not going to end well. And the Giants and Brian Daboll are going to try to force Jaxon Dart onto the field before he's ready, and that's a recipe for disaster. And I think what's even worse is if you look at this Giants schedule, the first 2 weeks are brutal, and really the whole season is brutal, starting with 2 divisional games against Washington and Dallas. Then you get the Chiefs week 3, the Chargers in week 4. There's a good chance this team starts 0-4. And I agree with your sentiment on Russell Wilson. I think those numbers that he put up in Denver a few years ago, even though they look good on paper, anyone who really watched the games know they were fugazi. Sean Payton should get more credit for those numbers than Russell Wilson should. And it's no doubt that as soon as the Steelers switched from Justin Fields to Russell Wilson last year, they got worse. And I still think that's a decision that Mike Tomlin should regret. We saw Russell Wilson in some big games last year against some of the AFC's top quarterbacks, like Lamar Jackson in the playoffs, like Patrick Mahomes, and it didn't end well. I think the Giants, similar to the Saints, similar to the Browns, are among one of the worst situations in the NFL. And I still think that Russell Wilson, I don't think he has a lot of great football left. I will have him at number 30. I think that was a real desperation move this offseason for the Giants after they got rejected by Matthew Stafford. At number 29, I'm going to go with Daniel Jones. And I agree with your sentiment on the fact that he definitely is the leader in the clubhouse right now to get that quarterback 1 spot for the Indianapolis Colts. But I'll say this, Will. I think that this situation with Daniel Jones signing with the Colts, it actually reminds me a little bit of a few off seasons ago when Sam Darnold signed with the 49ers. And if you remember, when Sam Darnold signed with the 49ers, he got a decent amount of money, similar to Daniel Jones and what he got with the Colts, right? Daniel Jones got $14 million guaranteed with the Colts. And as soon as he signed that deal, I said to myself, he's going to be their quarterback week 1. And we are upon the end of the Anthony Richardson era in Indianapolis. And I do think Anthony Richardson, he has so much talent. He's so young. I'm not even calling his career over, but what I'm saying is I don't think it's going to work out for him in Indianapolis with the team that drafted him. I think Sam Darnold, why I made that comparison, him signing with the 49ers, that was to be the backup to Brock Purdy. And that really signaled the end of the Trey Lance era in San Francisco. And we know that Darnold won the backup job. A few months later, Trey Lance gets traded to Dallas, and the rest is history. I'm not saying Richardson gets traded because Daniel Jones, he has some injury history. You probably don't want to give up on Richardson yet. But what intrigues me about the situation is I think you can make the argument that this situation with Indianapolis is better for Daniel Jones than the situation he was in with the Giants when he won a playoff game in Minnesota a few years ago. Jonathan Taylor is still a really good player. I like the trio of wide receivers this Colt team has with Pittman, Josh Downs. I think he could be in for a breakout year, and Alec Pierce. And then, of course, they draft tight end Tyler Warren from Penn State. I think he could be a star in the making. I think he's the real deal. The Colts offensive line, which we know the Giants they were never able to figure that out. I think it's pretty good. So those weapons along with Shane Steichen, I'm intrigued for Daniel Jones. I feel like when they first made the move and when I was first reading those reports that Daniel Jones was going to be the starter for the Colts, I was like, really? This is the guy that you're going to bring in? But we know the Giants were a dumpster fire. They paid Daniel Jones way too much money. That wasn't Daniel Jones' fault. That was the Giants' fault. And the Giants were never able to build a team around him. I feel like we've seen enough of Daniel Jones at this point in his career where we know he's not going to be the reason why you win games, but he's capable if you put him in a good situation. And I think for the most part, the Colts have done that. I think Shane Steichen, similar to Stefanski, he's going to be a coach that enters the season on the hot seat. Unfortunately, the Colts owner, Jim Irsay, he just passed away. RIP to him. And I'm curious to see what that change in ownership. His daughters are now taking over the team. Are they going to be in a rush to move on from Chris Ballard, their GM, a guy that hasn't made the playoffs in a really long time since 2020? Are they going to be in a rush to move on from Shane Steichen? This is now his 3rd year. He had a pretty good first year. Obviously, had some steps back last year. I think it's a big year for the Colts, and I find it interesting that of all the quarterbacks on the market, Daniel Jones was the guy the Colts decided to pay. But the more I look at the situation, I do think it could work out. There is a situation where it could work out. I'm not completely writing him off. I'm not completely writing this Colts team off. I'm still intrigued by Shane Steichen. I'm still intrigued by the situation. And at this point, we know what Daniel Jones is in his career. I'll have him at number 29. Now, at number 28, this is where things get interesting. And I think there are a lot of different ways to go. There are a lot of guys that I could have ranked in this range that are proven, guys that we've seen play before. that we know what they are. So that made me say, you know what? At number 28, I'm going to rank the guy that we haven't seen yet. And yeah, that's J.J. McCarthy of the Vikings. I'm going to have him at number 28 on this list. And that's simply because he hasn't played an NFL game yet, and he's coming off 2 major surgeries. I'm not as convinced as a lot of other people that J.J. McCarthy is just going to come into Minnesota and replicate the season that Sam Darnold had last year. As a matter of fact, I'm telling you, I'm pretty confident he's not going to be able to do that. And I understand Kevin O'Connell's a great play caller. I understand the situation's really good. But the thing about J.J. McCarthy is his college career, it's interesting because he wasn't asked to do so much. He played for Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. Of course, he won the national championship, and he just didn't ask McCarthy to do that much because the team was so loaded around him. And that doesn't work in the NFL. This Vikings running game is good with Aaron Jones, but the one thing about Kevin O'Connell, we know he likes to throw the ball a lot. And that was, I think, this team's detriment last year. In those 2 games that they lost late in the year against Detroit and the playoff game against the Rams, the Vikings could not get a running game going. And I thought their offense became pretty predictable, and the Rams were just able to rush the passer. Aaron Glenn and the Lions were able to just rush the passer. We know that when you get pressure in Darnold's face, he would usually crumble, and that was ultimately what put this Vikings team in. But yeah, that's really my sentiment ranking McCarthy here, Lil. Like, he hasn't played an NFL snap yet. I have no idea what to expect. He's coming off 2 major injuries. I need to see him prove it first before I rank him any higher. So I will have J.J. McCarthy coming in at number 28. And at number 27, I'm going to connect the dots. And I'm just going to say, I think that Sam Darnold and the Vikings were a perfect marriage. And I think the fact that they went their separate ways this offseason is going to be something that both sides regret. Yeah, I'm going to have Sam Darnold at number 27. I'm not as sold that he's going to go into Seattle and repeat the season he had last year. I get it. There's some good weapons on this team, right? Jackson Smith and Jigba. They signed Cooper Kupp. I'm not really sure how much good football he has left. Kenneth Walker, really talented player, but can he stay healthy? I'm not sure. And then Quentin Kubiak as the offensive coordinator. The Saints offense had a really good first 2 games last year, but what happened after that? Not a lot. Derek Carr was not able to figure it out. And look, as great of a season as Sam Darnold had last year, I'm not sure that he's going to be able to go into a situation outside of Minnesota and repeat that same success. And when it comes to Darnold, yeah, like he had one great year. I want to see him do it again. I just don't think the Seattle situation is as close to as good as the season he just had in Minnesota. So that's really my common trend. I'm going to look at those 2 parties, the Vikings and Sam Darnold. I think they were a perfect match for each other, and both sides are really going to regret moving on and going their separate ways. And my last point here, Lil, and maybe this is unfair to Darnold, but I'm just going to say it. Again, winning is the number 1 priority. The fact that this team, the Vikings, went 14-3 last year, and in their 2 biggest games of the season, their offense was nowhere to be found. They got punked by Detroit on Sunday Night Football with the division on the line. Their offense couldn't score. That playoff game against the Rams, even worse. Offense couldn't score. And look, as good of a play caller and as a head coach Kevin O'Connell is, I think he has a lot to prove, right? Like, he hasn't won a playoff game yet. And in the 3 biggest games of his career, right, he lost to Daniel Jones, ironically, in a playoff game. And then the 2 games last year, I just thought he got way too pass happy and he refused to run the ball. I think when you look at Sam Darnold, he'll miss that situation in Minnesota, despite the way those last 2 games ended. So that is my list. When you look at number 32 to 27, I will have at number 32, Spencer Rattler of the Saints. At number 31, Joe Flacco of the Browns. At number 30, Russell Wilson of the Giants. And at number 29, Daniel Jones of the Colts. At number 28, J.J. McCarthy of the Vikings. And at number 27, yes, Sam Darnold, the new quarterback of the Seahawks.
Yeah, definitely. I think the main thing here, and this is probably the only thing, because I think at this part of the rankings, right, the early part, there's not a lot of debate here. I think as you get closer to the top tier guys, that's when the debates really start ramping up. But I think for me, when you look at a guy like J.J. McCarthy and where I have him ranked, obviously I didn't rank him today. I think when I talked about me easing the projections a little bit, J.J. McCarthy is definitely, I'm moving him up and down my rankings. I'm not going to tell y'all where I'm going to land him, but, you know, obviously we didn't announce the other set, so I'm still working on those things, right? Even though I have a blueprint, I have a paper with 1 through 32, I'm still shuffling, you know, until we get there in the set. And I think JJ is one guy that I'm moving up and down because of those projections and where I think I want to go based off of also what I have on film or what I don't have on film. That's always a never ending, all right, where should we put him? But I think the way how you left off, and this is the question that I want to direct towards you. You have Sam Darnold, 27. You have Daniel Jones as well in this bottom tier group. You have JJ McCarthy in this bottom tier group. All three quarterbacks, ironically, was on the Vikings at one time. The Vikings last year won 14 games, right? They had a very good season. You look beyond last year and what they did with Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins, I thought, had the best 2 years of his career in Minnesota. Obviously, he go to Atlanta, he wets the bed. To me, that screams that, A, you have a hell of a coach in Kevin O'Connell, who's still there. B, you have a hell of a structure. Justin Jefferson. You have one of the great offensive lines. You have a good team, Brian Flores, a good defensive coordinator who's going to get you turnovers. His defense is aggressive. So my question to you is, now that you rank Sam Darnold and JJ so close, why don't you feel that JJ McCarthy can come and at least do, even if it's not the same as Sam Darnold did last year, but at least, close? I'm not expecting JJ to win 14 games this upcoming season, but why don't you think he will be able to win some games despite being in a great situation?
My worry about JJ McCarthy is he's fresh off two major surgeries. Obviously, one happened late in training camp last year, and then during the season, the second one, that's really the red flag started flying in my mind. But here's the main issue, though, Will. Jim Harbaugh, when he had J.J. McCarthy at Michigan, they had a great offensive line, the best offensive line in the country, filled with NFL players, and a great running game, featured Rams running back Blake Corum, who was their top running back. And all Michigan did that year was run the ball and run the ball and run the ball. And part of the questions with McCarthy during the draft process was, it was almost like he was drafted based on potential and the fact that NFL teams thought that, okay, if we ask him to do more than what he did at Michigan, we think he'll be able to do that, but there's no evidence, right? And that was part of why it was a risky pick. If you remember, I feel like early in that draft process, when people were talking about J.J. McCarthy as a top 15, top 10 pick, the consensus opinion was like, what? Based on what he did at Michigan, he did nothing. But a lot of it was based on his physical traits and that untapped potential. My worry is Kevin O'Connell, as great of a coach as he is, we know he likes to have his quarterbacks throw the ball. Again, I thought that was their detriment. I think that really cost them in their last two games last year. The fact that they threw the ball way too much. He put way too much pressure on his quarterbacks. Darnold he looked flustered very early on in that Rams playoff game especially, and they just couldn't get a running game going. And I'm worried that he's going to ask the same of J.J. McCarthy, fresh off two major knee injuries and fresh off the last time he played a full year of football. His team would just run the ball a lot. Your college football fans remember that Michigan-Penn State game 2 years ago. Michigan won, but they didn't throw the ball at all in the fourth quarter. They had like over 20 straight consecutive running plays because their running game and their offensive line was that good. I'm just worried that as great of a coach as Kevin O'Connell is, he's going to ask J.J. McCarthy to do too much with his arm, and I think that could be something that costs him.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what makes a good coach or not, is being adaptable to your players' strengths and weaknesses. If you know that J.J. McCarthy is coming off a major injury and he's essentially a rookie still, right, because you redshirt last year, you want to make sure you don't have him throwing the ball 40 times a game. And I think that Kevin O'Connell will not do that. And I would hope he won't do that. I hope he will run the football a little bit more. Off the play action, you have J.J. McCarthy throwing the ball. And I thought in that one preseason sample that I saw from J.J., I've seen a lot that I liked. And it was a lot of passing the ball too then. So hopefully they limit that a little bit. They run the football and they let J.J. shine. Because, again, you say winning matters, and I agree with that. He did a whole lot of winning in college. And I understand college and the NFL is different. But I'm not going to penalize him for the way how his football team ran in college with Jim Harbaugh. We know what Jim Harbaugh loves to do, which is run the football and play good defense. That's why Justin Herbert stats were very low this year, but it didn't affect his winning. Obviously, I thought Justin Herbert had a good year as far as keeping the interceptions low, but his stats was not it was not jumping off the page. And we know Herbert is capable of doing that. So I think let's see what JJ got. I just find it weird and a little bit head scratching that you rank Sam Darnold that low. And I'm not saying that you're wrong for ranking him that low. I'm not wrong for you thinking that last year was potentially a fluke. What I'm questioning is that you think Sam Darnold is that bad that he could be ranked that low, and you're not giving Kevin O'Connell that much credit. Because if Kevin O'Connell is that good of a coach to where you don't think that Sam Darnold could be successful on the next journey, then I think you should feel better about JJ McCarthy than you do.
Yeah, look, well, I'm not going to lie. I think the injuries with McCarthy are a big factor. Why I ranked him that low, right? This guy's coming off 2 major surgeries, one of them with his knee. A big part of his game is his athleticism and his mobility. I think that has a lot to do with it. And the main point I'm trying to make with these rankings is, look, I think there is a chance that JJ McCarthy is the long-term answer in Minnesota. I'm not even saying that is going to be a draft pick the Vikings regret. But I do think that it's going to take him some time. I think he has a lot of work and a lot of development to do. And I think what makes the Vikings situation so fascinating is, if you remember, like, they were not expected to be that good last year, especially after McCarthy went down. But it's almost like they were so good and Darnold was so good that it kind of jumped their timeline a bit. And I think that the decision to let Darnold go was based on the fact that, okay, we drafted McCarthy in the top 10 and we have to see him on the field this season sooner rather than later. But at the same time, if you're trying to win, I do think that you can make the case that Darnold would have been the better option for Minnesota. And the reason why I have him ranked low to contradict that is because I just don't love the situation for him in Seattle. I think he's one of those guys where he needs a really good situation to succeed around him. And if one thing is off, if one thing's not perfect, like we saw in that playoff game last year, then he could crumble.
And this is my last point. I think the fate that they have in McCarthy and the fate that Kevin O'Connell has in himself is why I believe in JJ too, because they had the opportunity to get Aaron Rodgers. I firmly believe that Aaron Rodgers wanted to go there. Perfect opportunity, top wide receiver in the game, great offensive line, one last ride, let's try to win a championship. But they were all in to JJ. So you're only all in when you see flashes, from before he got injured of, greatness. Because let's not forget that Sam Darnold did not win the battle, prior to JJ getting hurt. He won the battle because JJ got hurt. So I think it's going to be very fascinating. Look, you could be right. Maybe the injuries will play a part. Maybe I'm thinking too highly of him. Maybe I'm thinking too highly of Kevin O'Connell and the structure and the system and everything they got going over there as far as the culture and the football team there. But I think it's going to be a fascinating thing to see if their gamble in going all in with him pays off.
I'm happy you brought up Rodgers. I think the Vikings should have signed him, and I think that's going to be a decision that they regret. If you ask me which quarterback is more likely to win a Super Bowl this year with the Vikings, Aaron Rodgers or JJ McCarthy, my answer is Aaron Rodgers, and I don't think it's that close.
All right, Zach, that's a very interesting take right there. And speaking of takes, I want to get to our favorite segment of all time, the end of this show. Again, ladies and gentlemen, for the next set of rankings next week, 27 through 21, we're going to continue to release these quarterback rankings all the way through the summertime, in time for the preseason, in time for some football. Zach, I'm looking forward to the next set of lists that we do.
Of course, dude. That was a great start.